Welcome Rotarians and guests to the Rotary Club of Seattle, the fourth oldest and one of the world's largest Rotary clubs, where we embrace service above self and are connecting for good. Today we have our Rotary welcome mat out as we greet several international guests, including the former ambassador from Japan to the United States and his delegation. We'll also be welcoming 2 new members today. And right after that, we will be turning our attention to our community at large and looking at the inequities that have been documented and exploring with some experts what the public sector, the private sector, and the philanthropic sector can do to address inequity in our community. But to set the tone for us today, our club member and task force, for the Diplomatic Task Force Chair, David Woodward, will be inspiring us. And then Don Murphy is leading us in the national anthem. Trish Bostrom is accompanying him. And then I invite you to remain standing because Don Kraft is going to offer a remembrance. David?
Thank you, Kathy. The honor of having Ambassador Fujisaki here with us today and his delegation it reminded me of the first haiku that I learned in 9th grade. And so this is a very short inspirational thought. I will read the Japanese version and then the translation, and you can just let it sit with you. Shizuke ya iwa ni shimiiru semi no koe. The deep stillness seeping into the rocks, the voice of the cicadas.
So, we mentioned at the very beginning that we have some special guests with us today, and indeed we do. It's my pleasure to welcome a very special delegation called Walk in the U.S., Talk on Japan. And leading this delegation is Ambassador Ichiro Fujisaki. Ambassador Fujisaki has lived and worked in the U.S. on several occasions, including attending junior high school right here in Seattle back in the 60s. And then he was back in the U.S. again in the 70s to study at Brown University and Stanford University. After starting his career in the Foreign Service, he was posted twice to Washington, D.C., where he served as the Japanese ambassador to the U.S. From 2008 to 2012. In addition to his assignments in the U.S., Ambassador Fujisaki has also represented Japan in major capitals around the world, including Jakarta, Paris, Geneva, and London. Today, the ambassador serves as president of the America-Japan Society. He's chairman of the Institute of International Relations at Sophia University and sits as a board member and advisor to several corporations. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador Ichiro Fujisaki and his Walk in the U.S., Talk on Japan delegation.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here because as President Kathy-san said, 4 years ago, in November 2012, I retired from diplomacy, which I was in there for 43 years. On that day, I said to my wife, now I can say anything. My wife said, but no one cares anymore. So thank you very much for inviting me to this occasion. When I was ambassador, I was going around 50 states, major cities, giving lectures and all that. Everywhere, I said, I'm so happy to be here. Diplomatic crap. But here, it's true. Because this is, as she said, my second home. In 1960, I came here with my father. I was a student at Catherine Blaine Junior High School, which is no more there. But that time, I didn't speak a word of English. My mother said, when someone approaches you, just say, I don't speak English. If nature calls, say, where's the bathroom? These are 2 words I just was told, and I went to school. It was not easy to survive. But somehow I survived, and I made a lot of friends, and I'm very happy that I'm back now here. And when I was ambassador, the biggest thing that happened was 3/11 disaster. At that time, everyone else in the world helped us. But on the top of the list were Americans. American soldiers, American governments, American students, American churches, American kids, all helped us. 5 years have passed and we are on recovery. But I'm no more a representative, but I will say, thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu from the bottom of my heart to all the Americans. Thank you very much. And I came in 2008 and I left on 2012. So when I came here to United States in 2008, it was just during the election, US presidential election. And I try not to meddle into your election. It's a little delicate. And so one journalist came up to me and said, Fujisaki-san, Japan likes more Republicans, don't you? That was in 2008, not now, you know. And that time, my answer was, it's like a Christmas gift. You don't say anything till the day, you open the box and cry out, this is just what I wanted. That's the only way you can escape. I hope you'll have a good one this time. Four years ago, when I left Washington, Japan was in a bit of difficulty. Economy was stagnating. Politically, we had a row with Korea, we had a row with China, and people were thinking Japan is going to right, tilting to right, because Prime Minister was going to Yasukuni. And now, no one's saying that. Economy is on the way to recovery. And also, politically, Japan is a stable partner of the United States. Our relations with China is improving, our relations with Korea is improving, partly thanks to North Korea, but this is true. And US, I think, we in Japan really need the United States to be Asian Pacific power. We want a balancing with China and Russia and other countries there. We cannot really deal with those countries just by ourselves. And for United States to be a global power, I think you need Asia Pacific and you need a good partner, good stable partner. We are important partner to China trade-wise, but democracy, freedom of speech, non-use of force, we can only rely on the United States. So please continue to stay in Asia Pacific and if at all possible, try to conclude TPP with us. Thank you very much. Because I finished my speech within 10 minutes, which I was told that if you go over 9 minutes, someone will put up a hand and do like that, and he didn't need to do that. So Kathy has given me an opportunity to introduce my colleagues. I will ask each one of them to stand. Irina. She's telling about Cool Japan. She's from a cosmetic company called Shiseido, and she wanted to give you Shiseido cosmetic to ladies today, but she couldn't. So she did a special making today to show you how good this Shiseido is. Katsuya Yuzuki. He's talking about Abenomics, but he spent 10 years in California for sake brewery, and now back in Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan and dealing with real estate. Also, he likes surfboard and loves Tajikistan. What was it, the name? Tyler Hajik's surfboard. Okay. Kanako Katayama. She's talking about new energy, efficient use of energy. And she has been working for Sumitomo Trading Company and now works in law firm. So this is, well, you have a very nice making as well. Thank you very much.
So again, welcome to the delegation. They were in Portland 2 days ago. They spent yesterday and today in Seattle, and then they're on to Vancouver, so it's sort of a Pacific Northwest swing for them. Well, I'm excited to introduce our main program today. I heard a presentation by our county executive last spring on this topic, and I thought, we've got to talk about this at Rotary. So a lot of work went into the arrangements to have our guests here today, and the big thank you goes to our member, Allison Parker. Allison, will you come up for a minute? Allison's the Director of Plan Giving at the Seattle Foundation. She's been there for about 10 years, but she actually has worked for over 15 years in the philanthropic community. She works with nonprofits, foundations, corporations, individuals, and families to help fulfill their philanthropic goals. She has a great reputation of someone who gets the work done. She's been recognized by the Puget Sound Business Journal as one of their 40 under 40. She's also a very busy mom of a kindergartner, so she's a multitasker. Allison joined our Rotary Club 3 years ago, and she currently serves on our board. So I want to thank you for everything you do for our community, for our club, and especially for your help with today's program.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm excited to introduce today's program. When we look around at our natural beauty here in the Pacific Northwest, and in Seattle, we see all of these construction cranes, all of this wonderful prosperity, our vibrant arts and culture scene, and the wonderful, welcoming, diverse community we have a pretty fantastic community. But when you peel the layers of the onion back more and more, you'll see that actually many of the members of our community are not doing as well. So I'm excited to be part of this panel today, or to introduce this panel, because at Seattle Foundation, we look at everything through a lens of equity and opportunity. And today's panel will explain to you what equity means, why it's important, and what we as Rotarians and business leaders can do to be part of the solution. The panel will be moderated by Maud Daudon, and as many of you know, Maud has served as the Chamber of Commerce CEO and was actually the first woman to be appointed to that position. She's really focusing on the triple bottom line, advancing a strong economy, being a good steward of our natural environment and cultural assets, as well as not leaving people behind. Constantine, our county executive, was reelected in 2013 by the largest margin for that office ever. And as a county executive, he's working very hard to run the best government in our nation by focusing on two major challenges of our generation: building equity and opportunity and confronting climate change. Tony Mestres, CEO of Seattle Foundation, is just taken us by storm these past couple of years, and I will not use this opportunity to say anything funny about him, but he's really been recognized as a national leader for his expertise in navigating change and working across sector with business leaders, elected officials, communities, and philanthropy alike. Over the past 2 years, Tony's redefined Seattle Foundation's role to really be a strong voice for community needs and developing effective philanthropic strategies to address inequities in this region. So please join me in welcoming our panel and for today's discussion.
Well, hey everybody, how's it going? Good, good, good. I want to say to the ambassador, I can tell why you were such a great diplomat. I love that about the Christmas package. Just what I wanted. I love that. So I'm here to both host a conversation. I'm going to stand up because I think that's going to be easier. I'm here to host a conversation with these two gents who I've had the pleasure of working with very closely and admire greatly. And I'll throw in my 2 cents along the way from the business community standpoint, so you get a little bit of a feel for where we're coming from on these topics. But my first question for each of you is, how do your organizations define equity in this ever-changing dialogue? Tony, you want to start?
Sure. I want to just first say that as a member of Seattle 4, I'm very proud to be up here and talking to you all. This is a really critical and also exciting time for our region. To start off the conversation, I think it's also important to make sure that people understand the difference between equality and equity. And I don't want to presume that people don't understand that, but I just want to baseline us. Equality is about giving everybody the same resources and support to be successful. Equity is about giving everybody the resources and support they need to have success and opportunity. And when you hear organizations like ours, we all partner together on these issues, talk about what we're doing to drive for a more equitable society. We at Seattle Foundation not only hold that as a value, but it's also a stated strategic principle. The things that we encourage our philanthropists to consider, the things that we do with our assets to drive systems change are about that equity principle, which is really in dire need for our foundation right now, for our community.
Essentially the same, no, give me that. The same definition we use. Our notion is that every person should have the opportunity to fulfill his or her potential. And that is different than simply saying everyone has a fair shot. You can have a level playing field, but if your folks weren't able to afford the glove and the bat, or the admission fees for the select league, or the transportation to the tournaments, even if you're naturally talented, you're never going to get on that professional field as an adult. And the same thing's true across society, because people are born into different circumstances, because they're born into poverty, because they're born into a neighborhood that has not been attended to over the years, because they're born black or Hispanic. They can start out with deficits that have been handed to them, with barriers that have been placed before them. And people who can be the leaders of the next generation never really get a chance to get out there on that playing field and shine. So we need to make the investments that will allow each person's inherent value to shine through, and for everyone to be able to contribute. We've done a number of things at King County, and I just want to really briefly touch on them. You might remember Best Starts for Kids. It was a measure that was passed in King County by a fairly substantial margin last year. That's directed at exactly these early inequities and making sure the kids are getting the enrichment they need, the support they need, in order to arrive at kindergarten caught up with their peers and ready to compete and learn and succeed and move on to a successful life. We are also working on communities of opportunity with Tony and others, to make sure that those neighborhoods that don't have all the assets that those kids and families are going to need to flourish are put there. And we do that not by coming in and saying we have all the answers, but by talking directly with the communities and by plugging into the existing networks and finding the ways that are different in each community that we can make sure that next generation has a better chance. One of the things that's been a real impediment for a lot of folks is lack of access to health care. And we signed up thousands and thousands of people in King County for health care in the Affordable Health Care Act. And that actually reduced by over 50% the number of uninsured people in King County. And, yeah. And a lot of those folks are going to be folks who had injuries or illnesses that instead of being neglected and turning into really life-defining ailments were helped and cured. And that is a basic, simple thing that most people in this room, including me, have taken for granted. And of course, we're working on mobility. Orca Lift, which is a low-income bus fare card, so that people can get around and access all of these educational and job opportunities. And there's a little transit measure on the ballot this November as well.
Would that be ST3 by any chance?
That rings a bell, yes.
Would that be a good idea to vote yes? How do you
Yes,
think? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I was laughing, yes, thank you. I was laughing at Maud standing up because she and I got to spend a half hour perched awkwardly on chairs exactly like this at her chamber leadership conference last week. We're going to make a routine out of this.
We are. We're gonna go on the road, Dow. You know, all over.
Awkward sitting. That'll be great.
The awkward sitting road. Yes. So in terms of the business community and how we look at equity, I think very similarly, we think about access to opportunity on an equitable basis. So when we talk about the triple bottom line, and Allison, where are you? Thank you for talking about the triple bottom line. I talk about it everywhere I go. We really believe we have to have a strong economy. That's what chambers are all about, obviously. But we also believe we have to be great stewards of our natural and cultural environment, and we cannot leave people behind in our prosperity, that everyone should have access to that prosperity. And a lot of times in this latter category, we tend to focus a lot on education. We tend to focus on access to great education, because our feeling is that if you can be, if you have skills, innate skills, and they are built upon through education, you have access to opportunity. It's not the only thing that you need, but it is a really critical thing. And so we are focused a lot on that. We also do a lot of policy work, as you know, on things like housing affordability and transportation, like supporting unanimously ST3, yeah, just to throw that in again. And things that will help improve our community in lots of ways. So that's kind of where the business community comes from, which is a good pivot into why should we care about equity? What's in it for our community to really care deeply about this issue?
Well, I think that if you really want to geek out on this, you can look up two things after this lunch. One is something called the Gini coefficient by Professor Gini, and it measures the income or wealth disparities in a community. So if there are no wealth disparities, you have a 0 Gini coefficient, and the higher the Gini coefficient, the greater the gap. And what a number of us have worked on with Boston Consulting Group is looking at our region relative to the Gini coefficient, both in terms of equity and disparities, but also global competitiveness. And it just turns out that the lower a Gini coefficient you have, the more globally competitive an economic zone you are. And it's really important to digest this, because any conscious or subconscious perception that it's okay to have a society where some are doing very well and many are not, but that's okay because some business will be successful and capitalism can thrive, is actually empirically untrue, and it's proven. And we know in terms of looking at other globally competitive regions, they have a stronger middle class. Our region is really struggling with the decimation of our middle class. And we're also struggling in terms of people who are underemployed or unemployed. And I think that the important thing for us to recognize is that, across the United States, there's really 25 major regions where 80% of the population is, and population is surging on those regions. We are up here representing, private sector, public sector, the social sector, thinking about how do we rewrite the playbook on how regions can be more healthy and work together. What is the nature of partnerships like communities of opportunity to address things like that? For business in the room, we're excited to be engaged in helping you see that the opportunity to work on doing things like brokering people into family wage jobs, to actually look at how we can not only educate but also employ and bring economic inclusion to the people of our region, not only is the right thing to do in terms of fairness and humanity, but it's the right thing to do in terms of economic competitiveness and your overall profitability, valuation, competitive share, et cetera, going forward. And that's what our initiative, the Seattle Region Partnership, is all about.
When I go talk to businesses, and we formed, for instance, an aerospace alliance to see how we can strengthen our very strong aerospace sector with all the suppliers. And the first thing we hear about is not regulation, not taxes, not even transportation, although that's very high up on the list. It's workforce. We need more workers, and you hear that from all of our tech companies. So the first thing that the business community should care about is having people to hire who are trained and motivated and ready to take on the task. The tasks are much more complex and require a higher level of educational attainment than they did a generation or two ago. Second thing our business community needs is people who can afford to buy stuff. People who are getting by on minimum wage or doing worse are not free to spend in a way that is going to help our economy be successful. And third, we really need a safe, healthy community to live and work in. That's the kind of community that the best people from around the world want to come and participate in, the kind of community that reduces challenges like homelessness and crime and untreated mental illness. Many of the issues that I hear about every day from business people in our community. The good news is the business leaders in our region understand these imperatives. And this is, the agenda really is equity and opportunity for our business community. For example, we have strong support across the board from the business community for Sound Transit 3.
Did you say Sound
Yeah, I know.
Transit 3?
It's just,
Yeah.
it's
Is that
a
on
part
the
of
ballot
every, it's
soon?
a part of every answer.
Yeah.
But we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about the work that Maud and the Chamber and the business community broadly is doing around this challenge. In this county, of all the households, and there are perhaps 100,000 or more that have been created since the year 2000, something on the order of 96% of them earn more than $125,000 a year or less than $35,000 a year. Only 4% of the households are earning between those two very distant points. So it's kind of the old example, the rich are getting richer, or at least the comfortable are getting more comfortable. And a lot of folks who used to be able to earn a living, take care of their families, and own a modest home are slipping into poverty. And we've got to find a way, even as we continue to build this economy that is competitive globally, we've got to find a way for tens and hundreds of thousands of folks in our community to be able to earn a decent living.
Tony, you want to add something?
The thing that I also think is important to reflect on, and one of the things that our team at Seattle Foundation looks to as sort of a field manual, is this Robert Putnam, professor at Harvard, wrote a book called Our Kids, Frame of Things. And what Putnam and his team did is they looked at the experiences of kids from good education to athletics to the ability to study a musical instrument, family dinners, long list, a data model, and correlated that generationally to the achievement of the American dream, some modest semblance of the American dream. Stable housing, the ability to get education, economic opportunity, et cetera. And by that analysis in our country right now, and true in our region, only 1/3 of the kids in our country have any chance at the American dream. And it's very important for us in this critical time. I described the words, critical and exciting. It's critical because we as a region run the risk of going past a tipping point that could take decades and decades to pull ourselves out of if we do not figure out ways to ignite and excite the private sector in new ways, to partner across sectors in effective ways, to enlist our residents in equity and creating a stronger community for all. We have that opportunity now. It's not like it's closing tomorrow, but it's not going to be around for a decade. It's something that we really have to address right now, or else we will go the way of other regions in the country that have very different problems. What's exciting is we have all of the assets we could possibly ask for as a community. We have great corporate citizens, we have socially conscious residents and leaders, we have leadership in environmentalism, in wage equality, in gay rights, in gun control, the list goes on. So we just have to figure out how to work more effectively together toward that end.
Yeah, and I just would say, how many people in this room have been in a conversation in the last year or two where someone in the room says, boy, I sure hope we don't become San Francisco? Right? And I think what we're talking about is essentially that. We're saying, whether you are geeky and believe in the Gini coefficient, which we do at the Chamber, the income disparity challenge we're facing is big and it's real. And the good news is we actually have the opportunity to do something about it before we go the way, and we all love San Francisco, so no disparagement on them, but go the way that we've seen some of those challenges in San Francisco. We are rapidly becoming, because of our prosperity in the high-tech sector, a city that is where some are prospering like crazy, a region where some are prospering like crazy, and some are getting left behind. And so the challenge we have and the opportunity we have is actually pretty cool, because in the Puget Sound, we still have middle-income jobs. We still have pathway jobs. We have opportunities for people. And it doesn't require necessarily an advanced degree. It may require some post-secondary training of some kind to get into those opportunities. So there's a new effort, we're going to talk about it, which involves all three of us working together and many others, to try to do a better job of connecting people who need opportunity and who live here with that opportunity. And those are a lot of those disenfranchised kids in high school. Those are adults that have only partial degree completion. And then those are also returning vets. So we're really excited about that, and we could go on and on about it. But these two, I mean, it's so fun to hear them talk, because we could give each other speeches on this topic. I mean, we're very aligned in thinking between the business sector, the government sector, and the philanthropic sector.
And the only thing I want to make a footnote about is when you look at the disparities and the inequities that we're all working on, and that are core to the mission of Executive Constantine's team, the foundation, they are most extreme for communities of color. And we can't lose that. And we also, there's kind of a principle around talking about equity to recognize the voices that are not in the room. So we are talking about things right now about communities that really are not on the stage with us right now, but hopefully we can do a good job supporting their interests.
Yeah, I want to be able to get to your questions, so I'm hoping you're dreaming them up. Like, think about questions, because in about 1 second, I'm going to turn to you and ask you for some questions. But if you could challenge the business community to do one thing to address inequity in this region, what is it that you each would say to that question?
Well, first, I want to make sure that all business leaders understand the reality that a more inclusive economy is a more successful and more prosperous, overall prosperous economy. You might think that's some sort of socialist nonsense, but that means that the IMF and the World Bank and Standard & Poor's are socialists, because they're all completely on this. They understand that the inequities are actually dragging us all down, and that not everyone is contributing. When not everyone is contributing, we're not getting the most out of our economy. Second, government alone cannot successfully confront large-scale challenges like inequity and climate change. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort. It is a collective impact opportunity. And that is what the Chamber really is taking the leadership on in creating partnerships like the Seattle Region Partnership. That is business and local government and philanthropies together, finding ways, as Maud was alluding, to help people create that path for themselves and their family into financial security, into a job where they can afford to take care of themselves and raise their kids to be able to be successful in the economy that we have and that we're going to have in this 21st century, which is very different than the one we had when we were all kids.
I would say two things, one of which Seattle 4 actually embodies in its core mission, and that is model for the people in your companies as business leaders what being socially conscious and community focused means in terms of what you do, how you relate to others, how you build partnerships and build dialogue, and build connection at a time where our country is at risk of significant divide, widening the gaps and making things harder for us to work on together. The other, which is, Seattle Foundation's dream come true in terms of the private sector, is what if every company thought about its greatest strength, its core value, and its innovations, and how it might work with public sector, with nonprofits, to apply that to the challenges of our community. That in and of itself, we have great employers who have terrific corporate citizenship efforts. They invest a tremendous amount of money that may be sideways to what their CFOs necessarily can correlate to their economic success, save what we just talked about in terms of globally competitive zone. But they also have an opportunity, many of them, to think about, I have this great innovation. I'm very good at this particular skill, and how can we work to create a new partnership on that?
Exactly. I had this really fun conversation with David Zapolsky from Amazon a few weeks ago, and we were talking about their work creating that shelter in concert with Mary's Place in a building that they will eventually redevelop, but it's available now. And we're talking about the ways in which his company is developing its sort of philanthropic muscle, its community face, and how he and I thought it was a good idea for each company to find its own strengths and to leverage all of that magnificent creativity in the workforce to come up with unique and productive ways to do more across this community. It's great to, sponsor the fundraising dinner, and we need to have that happen. And especially sponsor the opera. I don't know where you went. But considering the abundance of intellectual capital in this community and in this economy, we have untold value there to unearth and really take on some of these societal challenges in a way that maybe other regions have not.
Great point. And I'm always blown away when I hear how much is already going on in the business sector on just that. Let me just say, does anybody have a burning question for the panel? Okay, we got one over here, I see, and one over there. So, Suzanne, you want to kick it off? And Ken, how much time have I got? Okay, great.
Yes. The research on education is very clear that people who have teachers who look like them and had similar experiences, whether they're children or adults, do better. What do you think you as a collective can do to foster more diversity in the teaching staffs of the elementary, secondary schools and the higher education universities in this area?
And, I don't actually know what we can do, but that's a really interesting point you bring up, and that's something we need to feed into our work together. It makes intuitive sense, I guess, that having a role model with whom you can identify can help you see yourself succeeding as well. But this is one of the challenges we have. We need to make sure that even in families where mom or dad or both are really stretched, working two jobs, not being able to pay all the attention that a lot of us received, that we are helping them help their kids to be able to be ready for kindergarten and to not get derailed during their school years, so that when they are more able to stand on their own 2 feet and see themselves as someone who can be successful, they really have the credential and the basis for moving on with higher education, job training, and a successful life.
The only thing I would add to that is that what we learn is most effective in helping communities, like communities you're talking about, is from those communities. The essence of what we are doing on Communities of Opportunity is going to local communities and talking with them, working with them, and hearing what they say they need to be successful, that being potentially an example. There are many other things they're learning, they're helping us learn, that we can then translate into policies and systems change to address that type of opportunity.
This is a very weird answer, but I would say the single most important thing we could do in the state of Washington on that question is fund the student need grant fully. And the reason I say that is because maybe you guys don't know about it, but there is an amazing program in the state of Washington to help people who can otherwise not afford to go to higher education institutions get there. And that includes teaching programs. And right now we have 35,000 people who are qualified for the state need grant, and there's not enough money to give them the state need grant. And that's a shame because a lot of those people are people of color. And we need to get, not just in teaching, but across the board, we need to employ our really diverse group of people that live in the state. So I always go there. I think that it would be incredibly helpful if that could happen. And it's our #1 education advocacy item at the Chamber this year, and has been for several years, I should say. Okay, a question over there. Yes. Just yell. Yep.
Is it working?
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to the homelessness question and the idea of further corporate involvement in innovative ways. I'm all for bubble-up solutions, and I love the energy that comes from that, but Mayor Murray's recent study that he commissioned suggests that part of our problem in Seattle is that we have 300 different organizations involved in homelessness. We have a homelessness industry here. So what I'm wondering is, each of you in these important positions in these 3 sectors, how do we work together to finally solve the problem, this most visible problem of inequality, homelessness in our community?
Homelessness, like other challenges that we have, is, as you all know, a space that has had a lot of activity, a lot of organizations working on it for a long time. When our team and our philanthropists step back and we think about the thing that we can do to help the community, to be a servant leader in the community in addressing it effectively, we come to the same conclusion time and time again, which is to go upstream towards economic inclusion, to addressing housing issues that are the root causes of why we have an increasingly large funnel of people who are entering the homelessness challenge. You cannot, in our opinion, intervene your way out of that. You have to go to prevention and systems reinvention, and that will take some time. But a large percentage, the biggest spike in homelessness is family homelessness right now, and many of those families have people who are leaving wherever they are unsheltered to actually try to go to work, sometimes to try to go to school because they don't want to be in that situation. And we have to get to them long before they're in that state.
I mentioned before this notion of collective impact, and I think that the real key is for us as a community, for everyone who's working on this and who's bringing something to the table, to align around that place on the horizon toward which we're all going, and each of us bring our best to that. It doesn't mean we all have to be one program. In fact, the approach we've taken in healthcare, in low-income bus fares, in a number of areas is to consciously not try to be the one-size-fits-all answer, not be the be-all and end-all, but be a forum for us to agree as a community on where we need to go, and then leverage all these networks that exist in our community to succeed in that. On the family homelessness issue, real quick, the very first program we've deployed out of Best Starts for Kids is a program to prevent families from falling into homelessness. Based on a pilot that was funded by the Gates Foundation, we ask people, what is it you need to stay housed? It might be first month's rent, it might be help with that professional certification you need to keep earning a living. It may be help getting out of a domestic violence situation, but it is so much less expensive to take a little flexible funding and deal with that person's specific self-identified challenge than to try to lift them and that family up out of homelessness after they've fallen into it. And those are the kinds of sensible, common sense solutions that we want to look to deploy, even while we are working to, build the housing stock that will ultimately slow this challenge.
And I just want to say, I don't even want to say how many years I've been in this community for fear of exposing myself, but in several decades, let's put it that way, I had the opportunity back when I was deputy mayor to really try to wrangle with this topic of homelessness. And then I've seen other subsequent administrations try to deal with it in the city. And I would say what typically has happened is the kind of system change that was called for in that report that you mentioned. Who has not had a chance to hear about this amazing report, the Barbara Poppy report that came out a few weeks ago, really points to a stunning set of realities for us and opportunities. But I was just going to say, in all these 3 decades, I've never felt as optimistic that we can actually take this on. I feel very optimistic. Why do I feel optimistic? I feel optimistic because that report really points a way. It may not be perfect, but it really points to a direction. And I'm hearing from my members an amazing amount of interest to engage. So how do we engage to really call for the system change that could really help these people on the street and to support our electeds to go there? I will say, in my experience, when I was in the deputy mayor chair and we were trying to make some changes, that it's really hard to do because all the human service organizations, and they are great, and there are many of them, come to your council chambers when your executive is trying to make these changes, and they bring their constituents, and it is heartbreaking, and everybody says, well, let's just give them more money. And that truly is not going to solve this. It needs to be a system, and it needs to integrate, and it needs to be outcome focused and go upstream. And so it's going to take a new approach. But I'm actually very excited that I think this is a moment in time, an opportunity that we could actually get that kind of change enacted with this kind of leadership. So I want to end on that optimistic note. I think we have run out of time. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Today, I appreciated this program, and I really mean it. Tony, Maud, Dow, thank you. We have heard a call to action. And so I want to say we as Rotarians want to stand with you to do what we can to be part of the constructive collective solution. So fellow Rotarians, let's get to work and do our part. We are adjourned until next week.